Hello guys and welcome back to the Sports Vehicle Performance channel. Today we're going to be filming a buyer's guide on this Porsche Boxster 987. This is going to be great if you're thinking of buying one of these. So we've put together a list of all things that we know of through our years of experience working on these cars that are common faults and potential things that are going to save you money if you're looking to buy one. So we're going to put this one up in the air and we'll talk you through it. The Porsche Boxster 987 is a great first entry into Porsche ownership. They're reliable cars, but can be very expensive if they haven't been maintained properly. Always make sure, if you can, get a Porsche specialist such as ourselves to inspect the car before you purchase. So the first thing on our list is service history. It's always important to make sure that you've got a good service history with your car. You can find low mileage cars with no service history and they'll be full of problems when you compare it to a high mileage car that's got a full book with full history. Whilst the car can have a full service book of stamps, always be sure to check more in depth. Look at the advisories, make sure they've been done as well, because yes, the car can have its oil changed, but if it's been advised on things like coolant pipes or stuff like that, if they've been ignored, that's where the money will be. As we say, it can be better to buy a high mileage, more regularly used car, because these suffer with a lot less problems, which you wouldn't believe. Things like brakes, corrode, batteries, you'll have flat battery problems, windows, rubbers going dry, all seals going dry, drive shaft boots, things like that. They'll all start to crack on a car that's low mileage and parked upon your driveway. This is another reason why don't be put off buying a high mileage car. Porsches are known for their great build quality and good paintwork, so it's always a good thing to check out the paint. Any blemishes or imperfections, that's a sign of work having been done to the car, whether that be from crash damage, potentially been on the track day, or just a cheap repair. Always make sure to have a good look over and check for any signs of imperfections. So now we're going to send it up and we're going to take a look underneath, covering things such as tyres, brakes and suspension. So we'll make a start with the suspension. A very common problem on these cars is the springs, especially the rear ones. The fronts can go as well, but we see far more rears. MOT failure, the rear springs will break. Here's a perfect example. Right here is part of the rear spring. The same on the other side. And if you come around here, we've actually got another Boxster on the ramp over here having the exact same thing done, a pair of rear springs. Very common problem. An easy way of checking for a broken spring is first to take a look at the car. Is it sat level? If the rear looks like it's dropped down or the wheel's got more camber on, it'll likely be a snapped suspension spring. If you also can get under, take a look and just feel around the bottom of the spring. That's where they often go. Even it can be just as a simple piece chipped away from the end or broken, a bit more like this one. So that's a simple way of checking for that. So moving on to the front, if you take a look at this one, the front bump stops are very common to go on these. So that'll obviously affect the way the car drives over bumps. You've got the damper rods, they also corrode, and we've actually seen these snap before. PASM cars are worse for this because they tend to be slightly thinner. So always, again, just take a look, and it's the same story with springs, they can go on the front as well. So take a look at the way the car's sat, if it's dropped, unevenly sat, and take it out for a drive, and you'll definitely notice if something isn't right there. Whilst the transmission on these cars are known to be fairly reliable, it's always good to check them. They have long service intervals and these can be easily missed. Some common things on the manuals are gear cables. We've seen lots of these snap and break off at either end. So that can be quite an expensive repair because it's not a 2-minute job. You've got to take quite a lot of the car apart on the inside to get them out. Along with the clutch, that's also another thing. Moving into the rear main seal and IMS, once the gearbox is off, if it hasn't been done, post 2006 cars have the larger IMS bearing. So it's always good to try and get a post 06 car. If you're buying an 05 or younger, make sure it's had it done, or if it hasn't, budget that into what you're willing to spend on the car. So moving back to the rear main seal that we just mentioned there's an example here, you can see one leaking. So that's the oil seal around the edge of the crankshaft on the engine side. The oil seeps through, runs into where your clutch and flywheel sit and then out the bell housing. It's one of these things, you can monitor them and chances are you'll get away with it for a while, but when it comes to a clutch change time, you'll want to factor in the cost of changing that at the same time. So moving on to the engine, aside from the IMS bearing, there's another thing that's very common on these engines. Well, I say very common, it's not actually that common, but there's lots of horror stories out there. So it's a scored bore. So this is basically wear caused in the cylinder liner. And then that will allow oil to leak past the piston, cause lots of symptoms such as smoke. You'll be able to notice it by a tapping sound, a very light tapping sound. It's not really you'll definitely hear it. It's not like an engine noise, it's a definite like tapping. You'll also see suttered up exhaust pipes can be another sign of it. So yeah, that's something to note out for, because that can be, that's a very, very expensive repair, probably outweighing the cost of buying the car. So that's something you definitely don't want. Specialists such as us, as part of an inspection, a pre-purchase inspection, can often, for a bit extra, carry out a bore score check. So they'll remove the spark plugs, put a bore scope inside the bores with a camera, check around for any markings, and that gives you great peace of mind. And I would highly recommend that to anyone purchasing one of these cars. So moving on to the brakes on these cars, whilst they're not actually too expensive to replace, it's always worth checking them out. Have a good look at them, put your hand through the wheel, feel the edge of the discs. You can do this on the outside if you're not underneath the car, if you're going to see it yourself and not having a pre-purchase inspection done by a specialist. You can feel the lip, if there's a lip on them, the chances are they're wearing down and they will need replacing sometime soon. And the similar thing with the pads, you can have a good look with your torch and often see the amount of thickness left on them. As I say, they're not too expensive to replace, so it's not the big worry. Just if you're going to need a set of 4, just budget that into what you're willing to pay for the car. Other thing is brake lines. The age of these cars now, coming up to sort of like 15 odd years old, at least, if not 20. Brake lines, they can corrode, and that can be very expensive. Little short ones off the calipers, they're not too bad to replace, and you can get them readily available. Some of the worst ones are under this cover here. It's done up on this car, but there's basically a block there, like a valve block, and under that cover there you'll get a lot of water and it will basically rot away the brake pipe, and if you've got to change that one, it's pretty much engine out job if you're going to do it properly. There are options of joining the pipe, but it's not done properly, so that can also be a very expensive repair. So always check over the brake lines, and I say keep an eye on MOT history and see if there's been any mentions of brake pipe corrosion. So it's always good to check out the tyres on the car, because the size of these wheels and tyres, they're not, they're not as cheap as buying tyres for a Ford Focus. They are a Porsche, so they can be quite costly and do add up quickly. Always check the tyre for wear, like uneven wear can be a sign of tracking or bad bushes in coffin arms and forks and stuff like that. So again, the cost of these all adds up, because if you're changing them, you've then got to redo your geometry, so the cost can soon add up. So moving on to one of the biggest problems these cars suffer with is the exhausts. As you can see on this one, the manifolds have been repaired before. There's a load of pigeon weld shoved in there just to try and stop the thing blowing. Flange gaskets up here and the fixings go. This one's actually had them done before. As you can see, the length of that stud, that's not a standard Porsche one, and that's, within the lifespan of the car, that's already been done once and needs doing again. The flange gaskets just fall out and they'll blow. Another common thing that we're seeing more and more of is the rear boxes. Up here is a very common point on the corner. You can see the bottom edge there starting to go, but the top's actually got a hole in it. I can nearly get my finger in it. So again, the cost of the exhaust on these cars can really add up, and it's not just the cost of the parts, it's the cost of the labour of getting them changed. If you take a look at the exhaust studs and bolts, they're extremely corroded, and it takes a lot of time to get them out and get them replaced. So an easy way to check this yourself, if you're just looking at a car on someone's driveway, for example, you can put your head under the back and you'll be able to get a good look at these clamps here. This will be a kind of a good telltale sign of what the state of the rest of the exhaust is like. Look at these clamps here. As you can see, this one here has got a split in it, and the fixings here are just completely corroded away. So that's a good telltale sign, and if you can get under the rest of it and have a further look, great, but that's a good place to start. So the other thing to mention here is on the front, big sort of ducts here, very low down, is a great trap for debris. So if you take a look down there, you'll see the radiators. When you're inspecting one or having a look at one, have a good look in there and look for any leaves. This one's actually all right. We've seen a lot worse than this, but the leaves will sit up against the radiators and condensers and corrode the faces away, making them no good. And again, that's another costly replacement to add to the list. Another thing to mention while we're at the front of the car is the coolant crossover pipes. This can be a very expensive replacement. It includes dropping the front subframe down to replace these pipes. If you take a look through the wheel, if it's at the right angle, you can get a good sight of them. These ones are actually not in terrible condition. We've seen a lot worse. I'll just get my hand down there now. You'll see this is the joints here. So there's little clips in them, and there's like alloy faces that push into each other with a rubber gasket. The alloy corrodes away and will eventually start to leak if you don't attend to them. And as I say, very expensive replacement. So another pretty simple check you can make that's going to guaranteed save you a lot of money if it is a problem is to check for damp in the carpets, especially the passenger side, because there's a rear end control module located under this passenger seat. What happens is the rear drains just behind me, they clog up with God knows what, moss, anything like that, stops the water draining out. It then seeps through into the cabin, into the carpet, and will soak the rear end control module. That's an expensive replacement, involves coding by a specialist. And yeah, not really what you want. So we'll drop the roof down now and show you where to check for blocks. The first thing to do though is just put your hand over the carpet and check if it's damp. If it's not damp, the chances are you won't have to check the drains. So as you see, we've got the roof to the halfway position. This is what you've got to do to check the drains. Just quickly run you over it now how to do that. So handbrake on, the top of the roof just inside the car, you've got a release latch, pull that down, push that, there's a thing here that says push that in, pull the handle down. Handbrake on, as I say, ignition on or engine on, and there's a button just to the side of the handbrake. Pull that until the roof's just above your head. You'll then be able to gain access around the rear of the car to this slot. What you need to do is push down on this, and that will pop that out there. And then you want to lift this up slightly. And then there are tabs here, little like cables. You pop them off like that, same the other side, and then, to be honest, you can actually get a torch down there as it is. Just get my torch, we'll shine that down there. If you look down there, see that drain, I'll try and get my finger on it for you. That drain there where I'm pointing to, I don't know if the camera's picking up, yep. That there, you want to make sure that's clean. As this car is clean, so that's a great sign. So you do the same the other side, and if it is blocked, you know, that's a warning sign. Go and check that carpet, check it's not wet, because that will lead to expensive repairs. So there you have it, some notable points for you to check when looking into your Porsche. Buying a Porsche is an amazing experience, but make sure to do your homework. If you're not going to do it yourself, pay someone to do it for you, such as ourselves or a Porsche specialist that is a well-trusted person and can go over the car and, you know, just highlight any points to save you money in the long run. Thanks very much for watching this video. Hopefully it's been informative. Make sure to like, subscribe and comment, and we'll have more coming soon.